Motivation often feels a bit like lightning, right? Like we're all just standing around hoping it strikes us out of nowhere. But what if it's actually something we have to actively build? Today's explainer focuses on a truly brilliant strategy from Steve Chandler's life-changing book, 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself, Change Your Life Forever. Specifically, we're diving into chapter 64, a concept he simply calls Get Your Soul to Talk. We are leaving those cliché self-help tropes in the dust today and moving into a really robust, actionable paradigm shift that completely changes how we generate our own internal drive.
So let me ask you something right off the bat. Do you talk to yourself, like out loud, or even just full back and forth conversations in your head? If you do, you probably keep it a pretty closely guarded secret. Culturally, we've always been kind of nervous about people who talk to themselves. If you're caught muttering your thoughts while walking down the street, society usually assumes you've completely lost your mind. Well, unless you're wearing a Bluetooth earpiece, of course. We're totally conditioned to think a healthy mind is a perfectly quiet mind, and that chatting with yourself is a huge red flag. But what if we have that completely backwards?
Let's dive into section 1, the stigma of self-talk, insanity versus genius. To really flip the script on this modern fear of self-talk, we actually need to look back at some ancient wisdom. It was the philosopher Plato who gave us this absolutely beautiful definition of thinking. He said that thinking is simply the soul talking to itself. When you frame it like that, talking to yourself isn't crazy at all. It's the ultimate intellectual tool. It's not some glitch in your psychology, and it certainly isn't a sign you're overthinking things. It is literally the fundamental mechanism of human genius, problem-solving, and self-discovery.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is that if you really want to get your life sorted out, there is literally no one better to talk to than yourself. Seriously, think about it. You hold the most comprehensive, unfiltered data about your own problems. A mentor, a best friend, even a highly paid therapist, they only ever get a carefully curated snapshot of your life. They only see a fraction of the puzzle. But you see the whole board. You know your hidden skills, your deep-seated fears, and your actual capabilities way better than anyone else. Ultimately, no one can do more for you than you. You are uniquely qualified to be your own life coach, but only if you're willing to have a real, honest, no-nonsense conversation with yourself.
All right, let's look at section 2, Proof Beats the Parrot and the Fatal Flaw of Affirmations.
Okay, so this brings us to a massive conflict between what the self-help industry constantly tells us to do and what actually works in the real world. A lot of motivational gurus push daily affirmations. You know the drill. You pick a phrase like, every day in every way I'm getting better and better, and you just repeat it. You repeat it over and over, whether or not you actually believe it's true. Chandler calls this brainlessly parroting. And the problem here is the massive internal friction it causes. When you chant an affirmation that deep down you know is false, it creates cognitive dissonance. Your brain just outright rejects it. Conversations, though, they are vastly superior. Instead of blindly repeating a phrase, you engage in a logical argument. You literally argue the case for your own improvement, and you logically win that argument in your own mind.
See, it's one thing to try to hypnotize yourself, because honestly, that's what affirmations are trying to do. They rely on the sheer, exhausting repetition of words to force your brain to accept something. But it is a completely different ballgame to actively convince yourself that something is true. Convincing requires logic. It requires cold, hard evidence. When you have a back-and-forth conversation with yourself, you aren't hypnotizing, you're actively engaging your intellect, laying down actual bricks of logic to build a rock-solid belief system.
And with enough of that back-and-forth conversation, you can literally prove to yourself that you're getting better. You supply the evidence. When doubt starts creeping in, you actively remind yourself of a past victory where you crushed a similar obstacle. You counter your own internal objections with facts. And as Chandler states so perfectly, proof beats the parrot every single time. Real evidence just works faster, and it makes a much deeper, longer-lasting impression than repeating empty words into your bathroom mirror.
Which brings us to section 3, disputing your own pessimism and the psychology of self-debate. To really ground this in psychological science, Chandler points to some of the heavy hitters in the field, starting with Martin Seligman and his landmark concept of learned optimism. Seligman offers these structured ways for you to actively dispute your own pessimism. And I want you to really notice that word dispute. It is a debate. When your brain throws a totally pessimistic thought at you, like, oh man, I'm going to completely fail this presentation, you don't just passively accept it. And you definitely don't just paste some fake happy affirmation over it. No, you step right up to the podium and you argue back. Actually, hang on, I prepared for 3 weeks and I know this material inside out. You create the habit of optimistic thinking by consistently winning these debates against your own inner cynic. Moving right along to section 4, 2 essential morning questions to activate creative thinking.
Here, Chandler turns to another psychological powerhouse, Nathaniel Branden. He's the author of The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. Branden suggests that we really need to get our creative thinking firing every morning by feeding our minds provocative sentence stems to complete. Specifically, he recommends asking yourself 2 super simple yet incredibly profound questions the moment you wake up. Number 1, what's good in my life? And number 2, what is there still to be done? I actually want you to try this right now. Take just a brief second to mentally answer those 2 questions. By simply asking and answering these in a genuine back-and-forth dialogue with yourself, you instantly spark a level of creative, productive thinking that will absolutely carry you through the entire rest of your day.
All right, final piece of the puzzle, Section 5, talk yourself into it. Active versus passive mindsets. Let's take a second to compare standard societal habits with the daily habits of highly motivated people. Look, most people don't talk to themselves at all. Instead of an internal dialogue, they indulge in pure passive consumption. They wake up and immediately switch on the radio, or they flip on the TV, or they spend their morning gossiping. They spend their entire day just filling up on the words and thoughts of other people, totally letting society dictate their mental state. Active motivation, conversely, requires real effort. It requires that back-and-forth self-conversation, logically arguing your case, and intentionally asking yourself those vital morning questions.
And the harsh reality that Chandler presents is this. It is entirely impossible to indulge in that kind of passive consumption, just absorbing everyone else's noise all day, and also get motivated. You just can't do both. When your mind is overflowing with the voices from the radio, the television, and your coworkers' drama, there is absolutely no room left for your own soul to talk. Motivation requires space, you know? It demands that you clear out all that mental clutter so you can actually hear your own voice.
Which brings us to the central, absolute most powerful takeaway from Chandler's work here. Motivation is something you talk yourself into. It's not something that strikes you out of nowhere like a bolt of lightning. It isn't something you can just passively absorb by watching 100 inspirational videos online. True, lasting motivation is an active, ongoing, internal conversation. It is a logical, daily debate where you convince yourself with hard, undeniable proof of your own capability and your own upward trajectory.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought for today's explainer. It's time to stop parroting empty phrases and really start debating. Put down the passive consumption, silence all that external noise, and get your soul to talk. Because honestly, the most important, life-altering conversation you are ever going to have is the one you have with yourself. The mic is yours. What will you talk yourself into today? Thanks so much for joining me, and I highly encourage you to put these tools into practice the second this is over.